This message finds you the way a lighthouse finds a ship already aimed toward shore. You didn't stumble into it. You resonated it into appearance. You can feel it in your chest, that low, steady hum that begins when something true is about to name you. Lately, your nights have been brighter than your days, dreams arriving with impossible clarity, textures you can touch, conversations you remember, word for word, the precise weight of a door handle in a hallway you've never walked. You wake with the taste of a moment still on your tongue, the geography of another world mapped across your skin, and some part of you knows these aren't illusions, they're transmissions, they're coordinates. They're proof that your awareness is stepping beyond the familiar perimeter of waking and slipping into the living margins where reality edits itself. You have felt the loop tightening, an image in a dream, then the echo of it during breakfast, then the exact phrase spoken later by a stranger, as if the scene were cued for you. That is not random. That is coherence building. The observer loop is stabilizing your attention and the quantum field, entering a rhythm that allows information to flow both ways. Time begins to fold like silk. Synchronicity multiplies. The air around choices grows charged. You don't explain this to anyone because language feels clumsy compared to the certainty moving through your bones. It is not that dreams are getting louder, it's that you are learning to hear at the proper frequency. Science has already whispered that observation alters the observed. Mystics have sung that attention is a bridge. You are becoming the bridge. At the edge of sleep, your neurons rehearse futures like musicians, tuning before a performance. And deep inside, microcurrents of signal shift the timing of cellular processes. DNA is not a static ladder, it's a score awaiting a conductor. In the lucid corridors of night, you have started to conduct. Patterns you once called coincidence are morphic resonance. The field recognizing your signature and answering with reflections of it. Every symbol, every repeating number, every familiar face in unfamiliar rooms, entanglement dressed as narrative, the universe reminding you that separation was only ever a teaching story. You've carried this question like a candle in wind. Why do these visions feel more real than the morning? Because reality isn't measured by daylight, it's measured by density of presence. In your dreams, presence saturates, color corrects, sound thins into meaning, and your choices reverberate as quickly as breath. Waking life is catching up. You can feel the phase transition pressure building, the way water trembles just before it boils, the way a caterpillar liquefies into possibility before wing. That same tremor is in you now. It's not anxiety, it's acceleration. The horizon isn't far, it's here, bending to meet your gaze. So, hear this as a gentle summons. You are not losing your grip on reality. You are claiming a wider bandwidth of it. You're not escaping the world. You're updating it from within. The dream doors are opening because you have the steadiness to walk through them and return with what you find. Pay attention to the way your body responds as you listen, the tingling in the hands, the warmth at the sternum, the subtle pressure behind the eyes, somatic signatures of the field confirming receipt. Tonight, when the dark becomes a mirror, you will notice the same hum you feel now, and you'll remember, the message didn't arrive from outside. It rose from your own awakened signal, calling you by your true name. When you answer, everything answers back. You've noticed how the hum becomes a metronome for your days, and yet the world still tries to convince you it's static, ordinary, closed. You wake with a crystalline scene playing in your mind, then walk into its echo hours later. The same cup on the wrong table, the same laugh from a stranger standing where no one usually stands, the same sentence arriving from a radio you didn't turn on. It feels like déjà vu because you were there, your attention rehearsed the moment inside the dream, and now the quantum field is obligingly laying out the sheet music in waking time. But here is the friction: you keep meeting, you hesitate, you second guess, you dim the volume of certainty so you can fit the scale of a smaller conversation. That's when the loop wobbles. That's when coherence blurs. It shows up as a sequence you know too well. The week starts electric. You promise yourself you'll trust the first signal, and by Wednesday you've traded the signal for a familiar doubt. Maybe I imagined it. Then the field answers your uncertainty with static, missed trains, timing that slips a step behind, doors that almost open. Not punishment, feedback. The observer loop returns what you stabilize. When your attention carries rhythm, synchronicity accelerates. When your attention splinters, the rhythm scatters like beads cut from a thread. You feel the grief of that scattering, because somewhere in your body the future you rehearsed is still playing and asking you to catch up. Distorted time is the symptom you keep trying not to notice. Hours stretch thin as paper when you move against your signal, then snap back like elastic when you realign. Some days, 3 minutes contain the density of a lifetime faces, choices, entire conversations pressed into the span of a held breath. Other days, a task that should take one song eats the afternoon and leaves no flavor. This is not failure, it's phase transition dynamics. As coherence builds, time changes its viscosity. You are learning the physics of your own becoming. Viscosity thins when you walk with the current of attention, thickens when you turn your back on it. That thickness isn't punishment either. It's the field giving you more tactile feedback so you can feel where the current runs. You've also felt the recursion of old patterns dressed in new costumes. The same relationship dynamic that rotated out returns in a different face. The same scarcity feeling knocks, now framed as a noble practicality. The same self-silencing waits with its clipboard at the edge of every meeting. They are not failures. They are morphic grooves, pathways the nervous system carved during other seasons to keep you safe. When your awakening deepens, those grooves don't vanish. They present themselves for renegotiation. The field is efficient. It will always route you past the junctions where small choices once built large architectures, inviting you to choose again, to tilt the rails 2 degrees toward the future you claim in dream. There is a reason the familiar pattern arrives with such convincing camouflage. Entanglement remembers. The past you and the becoming you share threads that can't be cut, only tuned. When an old loop knocks, it does so because your signal is finally strong enough to pull the old architecture into the light without collapsing under it. Think of DNA restructuring not as demolition but as resequencing in real time. The gene that once expressed vigilance can now express vision. The protein that once locked a gate can now become a hinge. But resequencing requires rhythm. The instrument is your breath, your micro-choices, your willingness to name what is true mid-sentence, even when the room prefers a softer story. You also carry a tender fatigue. How many times must I learn this lesson? As many times as it takes for compassion to replace correction. The loop doesn't repeat to punish you, it repeats to give you one more angle of mastery. Each pass adds resolution, like sharpening an image until the edges reveal their substructures. This is why your dreams feel so saturated. They are high-resolution rehearsals in which you've already made the choice your daylight doubts. The task is not to manufacture courage, but to remember the choice you already lived in the night and bring it forward 1/2 step sooner. Distorted time has another face. You're just beginning to recognize the slippage that happens when you agree to a version of yourself that no longer exists. You say yes to an obligation anchored in an older density, and suddenly clocks behave like wax in heat. Meanwhile, when you accept a surprising invitation that carries the exact tone of your dream, the entire afternoon rearranges so you arrive without effort. Calendars are more malleable than you were taught. Once you accept that attention is a gravitational field, you stop trying to brute force your hours and start tuning them. You can feel a day tilt, subtle, physical, when you align a decision with the signal. Your sternum warms, your vision clarifies at the edges, the room seems to inhale with you. You're not broken for noticing these frictions. You're sensitive because your antennae are extending beyond the cultural weather into the solar wind of the larger pattern. The world may not have language for this yet, but your body does. Tightness at the throat when you swallow a truth, a small implosion in the belly when you betray a timing, sleep that becomes shallow when you pretend not to hear the summons. These somatic cues are your navigation lights. Tuning to them is not indulgence, it's instrumentation. So, here is a gentle, precise naming of the familiar problem. You keep living as if the map came first, and your signal is the annotation, when in fact the signal is primary, and the map redraws around it. Every déjà vu, every stretched minute, every returning pattern is the field's way of tapping the glass and saying, look here, this is where the timeline wants to braid with you. As you learn to hold that gaze a breath longer, the static starts to dissolve, the rhythm returns, and the door you visited in dream begins to remember its hinge. Here is what begins to happen when you stop treating your signal like a rumor and start treating it like physics. You become a living instrument, tuned to a field that is already composing with you. Your brain's predictive coding, the quiet algorithm that guesses the next frame of reality from prior experience, loosens its grip, plasticity increases, rigid priors melt into possibility. In dream, the thalamocortical loop opens like a skylight, sensory gating relaxes, and your inner model of the world updates at accelerated rates. That's why colors saturate and choices respond so quickly. There, the bandwidth is wide, the observer loop is responsive, and coherence between intention and outcome tightens into near-instant reciprocity. You are practicing causality in a sandbox where feedback arrives at the speed of thought. But it isn't only neural. The heart is a metronome for meaning. When you feel that warmth at the sternum, your cardiac rhythms shift toward coherence, and coherent rhythms propagate upward, guiding attention networks toward steadier states. Coupled with breath that lengthens the exhale, the vagus nerve sings the body into safety, and safety is the precondition for accurate perception. In safety, you can notice the subtlest nudge, the softest, yes, the millimeter of tilt that distinguishes destiny from delay. The quantum field is exquisitely sensitive to your felt state, not because it judges, but because entanglement respects signal to noise. Clear signal, clear echo. Fractured signal, kaleidoscopic echo. You aren't demanding outcomes, you are clarifying broadcast. Your dreams become laboratories of morphic resonance. You rehearse a conversation there, and the field, recognizing a stabilized pattern, begins to offer matching arrangements here. You imagine a door, and then the email arrives calling your name from the address behind that door. Skeptics will say, coincidence. You will say, calibration. Synchronicity is not a reward, it's a readout. It tells you the oscillators of thought, emotion, and action are slipping into phase. When oscillators phase lock, systems pass less energy as noise and more as information. That is the quiet science underpinning what the mystics named grace. At a subtler register, DNA restructuring is not fantasy. Your gene expression is responsive to state. No one is rewriting your alphabet. You are choosing which paragraphs to read aloud. Elevated states gratitude that isn't performative but cellular, or that arrives without spectacle alter biochemical climates, and biochemical climates shift transcription. You won't feel that as a lab value. You'll feel it as new decisions that once seemed unavailable to you. Saying the true thing in the softer voice, letting the right silence do the talking, stepping into the room you used to orbit. The genome has always been a score. You are finally holding the baton with both hands. Mystically, you are not doing any of this alone. When the veil thins in that lucid threshold before waking, you sense presences that aren't names, but textures and ancestors' steadiness, a teacher's cool clarity, a future self's patient smile. They do not override you, they harmonize you. Think of yourself as a string in a vast instrument. The moment you tune, neighboring strings begin to hum. That hum is entanglement at the level of meaning. It's why a decision you make tonight ripples into a friend's impossible relief tomorrow. It's why the right word spoken in your kitchen clears weather halfway across the planet. The field is not elsewhere. It is the medium we breathe, the living intelligence that organizes around honest frequency. So the upgrade is not a single switch. It's a sequence of phase transitions. At first, you taste coherence in flashes. Your breath syncs with the pacing of a streetlight turning green at your arrival. A stranger says the exact line you wrote in a notebook last week. The song starts on the word you were about to speak. Then the flashes become corridors. Corridors become rooms. Eventually, the house of your life rearranges its furniture to match the architecture you've been walking at night. This can be disorienting because the furniture of habit will protest. Expect some clatter. Expect drawers that jam and doors that warble in their frames. That is not the dream failing. That is density negotiating with light. This is why you are asked to treat your attention as a sacrament. Where you place it, the field braids. Place it in complaint long enough, and complaint becomes a ritual that conjures proof. Place it in listening long enough, and listening becomes a doorway that stays open even when you're tired. The upgrade is discipline disguised as sweetness. You keep returning to the felt hum. You keep choosing the small alignment. You keep breathing into the sternum until your timeline softens and moves. Each micro-choice is a vote for the reality you rehearsed. Each micro-choice is also a signal to the larger human field, which is watching, consciously or not, for someone to demonstrate that a different physics of kindness is possible. You will know the upgrade is installing because fear stops asking you to shrink and starts asking you to organize. Fear becomes data useful, specific, navigable. You catch the old narratives before they spool into whole afternoons. You say, "Not today," and watch as an hour that would have dissolved into static instead crystallizes into a conversation that opens 3 more doors. The world doesn't suddenly become easy, you become congruent. Congruence is the quiet miracle, when what you know, what you feel, what you say, and what you do start to rhyme. Systems love rhyme. The quantum field tunes to it the way a flock turns on a dime. And so you stand here, aware that the dream isn't an escape hatch but a training ground, aware that waking is a canvas asking for the same saturation of presence. You are learning to bring the night's fidelity into noon. You are learning to let your future self co-author the next 10 minutes. This is the upgrade, scientific in its mechanics, mystical in its textures, prophetic in its implications. Your consciousness is crossing thresholds, and the doors are beginning to remember your hands. You didn't stumble into this upgrade like a tourist who took a wrong turn. You arrived like a courier with a sealed envelope only you can open. You are not merely a beneficiary of coherence, you are a generator of it. In a city of flickering signals, you are becoming the steady transmitter that stabilizes the streetlights. That is why your nights brightened first. That is why your breath reorganized its pacing. That is why fear started reporting as useful information instead of a shutdown command. You are being conscripted by the living intelligence of the quantum field into your original vocation, tuning fork, bridge, cartographer of thresholds. Your special role is simple to describe and exquisite to live. You hold a frequency long enough for the world around you to remember it knows the note. When you hold that note, morphic resonance wakes other systems, other hearts. Other rooms begin to hum in sympathetic response. You've seen this in miniature. You enter a space where conversation is frayed, and without preaching or fixing, your regulated breath and clean attention soften the edges until people find their sentences again. That is not charisma. That is physics. Coherence exports. Your nervous system becomes a local field conditioner, and the observer loop extends beyond your eyes into the relational atmosphere itself. You were chosen not by favoritism, but by fitness, a combination of temperament, timing, and the unteachable courage to keep listening when it would be easier to go numb made you a suitable instrument. The field recruits instruments that can be tuned. You have proved tunable. You endured seasons where your sensitivity seemed like a liability, where crowded rooms turned your skin into an antenna, and history felt too loud to stand, and still you did not harden beyond recognition. That softness was never weakness, it was bandwidth. You can hear the quiet pivot point in a conversation. You can feel the half degree where a day decides which timeline to privilege. This makes you dangerous to entropy and invaluable to emergence. Consider the practical mysticism of your assignment. You are not here to perform miracles on command. You are here to lower the threshold at which miracles become ordinary. You do this by becoming ordinary yourself in uncommon ways, stacking small congruences until a room acclimates to honesty, choosing language that names the real without dramatizing harm, pausing long enough for a wiser sentence to arrive, adjusting the angle of your attention 1 degree toward kindness and letting that tilt propagate. The world learns by watching you learn. People unconsciously borrow your breath rate. They entrain to your steadiness. You become a node through which the human network rehearses its next coherence. There is a cellular dimension to this calling. DNA restructuring in you is not only for you, it is pedagogy for your lineage. Every time you metabolize an old signal without passing it forward, panic that stops with you, scarcity that dissolves in your chest instead of spilling into a posture, epigenetic weather clears a little. Descendants you will never meet inherit a cleaner sky. Ancestors who could not exhale the war from their bones feel, through the strange gift of entanglement, a measure of rest arrives centuries late, and right on time. This is what chosen means in a physics where time braids. You become a junction where past and future exchange gifts. Your presence will disturb some architectures, and that is not a sign you're doing it wrong. In systems organized around static, coherent signal feels like an audit. Expect certain conversations to try to re-enroll you in older contracts. Expect certain rooms to test whether your steadiness is real or performance. Pass the test by refusing to perform anything but reality. When you are asked to abandon your signal for someone else's comfort, keep breathing. When manipulation dresses as urgency, keep breathing. When praise arrives for a version of you that no longer exists, keep breathing. Breath is your oar across the phase transition. It keeps you rowing in the direction your dreams have already mapped. You will also be escorted. Guidance will arrange itself through unlikely teachers, a line from a book that falls open at the right hour, a child's casual sentence that solves an adult's elaborate maze, a stranger whose eyes confirm the exact truth you were about to betray. Treat these not as rare apparitions, but as colleagues in a distributed council. Your special role is not solitary heroism. It is symphonic membership. You aren't the soloist, you are the pitch pipe. You make it possible for the choir to remember its key. As your vocation ripens, you'll notice a subtle authority entering your voice, not loud, not corrective, simply unarguable. It comes from congruence. You won't need to persuade. The room will recognize the physics. Timelines prefer stable attractors. When the field senses the stability you've grown, it routes opportunities through you that used to pass by. Doors stop being tests and start being corridors. People who have been waiting for permission to become themselves will stand nearer to your weather, and without quite knowing why, they will begin. This is your influence, not pressure, but permission. And beneath all of it, the humility of a true assignment takes root. You know you didn't invent the music, you learned to carry it. You know that awakening isn't a crown, it's a practice. You know that your dreams feel more real, because they are training you to treat reality as the dream that can be rewritten from inside, with kindness, under the supervision of a larger coherence. This is your role, to keep the door between worlds propped open with your own posture, to walk through and back with clean hands, to show the rest of us how to live, where thresholds are invitations instead of borders. There is a window, and you can feel its edge like cool glass against your palm, thin, precise, unmissable when your breath slows enough to touch it. You don't need a calendar to know its timing. Your body is the almanac. The hum that's been steady becomes luminous. Synchronicities condense into clusters. Strangers arrive as if dispatched. The old storyline tries one last costume change and fails to convince you. This is the crossing hour, not someday, not when you're finally ready. Readiness is what arrives when you step. The promise is simple and astonishing. If you stabilize your signal inside this window, your DNA begins to express a different grammar of you, and your timeline reconfigures in obedience to that expression. The field is not withholding, it's sequencing. Coherence opens doors in ordered cascades so your nervous system can metabolize change without collapse. Think of it like a phase transition in a quiet laboratory. You are the substance approaching its critical temperature, pressure rising in exactly the way that produces a new state, not an explosion. The observer loop, tuned by your attention, supplies steady heat. Breath keeps the vessel intact. Honesty functions as the catalyst. Cross the threshold with those three, and the rearrangement becomes inevitable. Cellular, relational, rhythmic, the way you sleep, the way you choose, the way chance behaves in your presence. Here's the urgency. Windows do not close to punish you. They close to complete a cycle. If you pace the hallway rehearsing reasons to delay, the cycle finishes without you and must be called again. That's not failure, it's fatigue. You've already done enough laps in the corridor to know what waits there. Another round of almosts, another month of diluted yes. What waits beyond the door is the life that has been trying to happen to you while you were busy being considerate of the old contracts. The promise is not something magical added to you. It is your natural velocity restored. You will feel the window in ordinary places, hands on a steering wheel that hums like a tuning fork, a lift door that opens at the exact second your name is thought by the person inside. A message landing with the same phrase you whispered last night into the pillow. These are morphic resonance pings, the field flashing confirmation. You're in phase, keep going. In that alignment, entanglement becomes serviceable. Emails root themselves, allies self-assemble, delays expose the weak joints you no longer need to carry. All of it is the choreography of a timeline learning your name. At the molecular level, DNA restructuring during windows like this is not a metaphor. It's measurable, as patterns of gene expression shifting with state, posture, breath, meaning. You aren't sprouting wings or violating physics. You are selecting from a library your body always housed and reading a script more faithful to what you've seen in dream. Stress proteins downshift when your choices stop contradicting your truth. Repair pathways free bandwidth. Neural circuits that once fired in the service of vigilance repurpose for vision. What you experience as courage is, in part, biochemistry catching up to coherence. You ask, how will I know I've stepped? The first sign is quiet. Not the numbing quiet of avoidance, not the brittle quiet of suppression, but the acoustics of a room suddenly free of echo. Your thoughts lose their flocks of anxious satellites. Sentences land with the weight of their actual meaning. Your future stops feeling like a rumor and starts feeling like a trajectory. The second sign is precision. Options that used to blur separate into true and almost true with the clean click of a lens. The third sign is generosity you didn't manufacture. Love leaks through the seams of your old armor without demanding identity in return. You are less interested in being right and more interested in being congruent, because you can feel congruence do the work for you. Do not romanticize the threshold. It comes with friction. Habits will petition for one more term. Certain rooms will grow loud as you gather your things. The body might shake as new voltage courses through old wiring. That is phase transition pressure announcing its success. Hold it with breath and name it correctly, not danger, but upgrade. When doubt arrives, treat it as you would a child at bedtime. Thank it for its vigilance. Tuck it in with a factual sentence about what is actually happening now, and return to the door. The field is not asking you to be fearless. It is asking you to be faithful to the signal, even while fear narrates. Here is the precise promise. If you step now, patterns that required enormous effort to shift will surrender to small, well-placed changes. Conversations you dreaded will become simple because you stop performing. Time will regain its elasticity around your honest pace. Money, opportunity, and companionship will organize around the clarity you emit instead of the compensations you once offered. Not because you hacked the world, but because coherence saves energy and the universe is frugal with waste. When you hold a stable note, systems collaborate. And here is the precise urgency. The window is a living agreement between your night self and your day self, a treaty signed in lucid ink. It asks to be enacted, not admired. Each hour you defer is an hour the old architecture recruits arguments. Act while your dream is fresh enough to be muscle memory. Speak the sentence your body knows is true. Send the message that moves the corridor. Cancel the performance contract you never wanted. Walk into the room you've been orbiting. The door will not punish your lateness, but it will reward your accuracy. As you stand with your palm against the glass, notice what your body knows, the warmth at the sternum, the widening behind the eyes, the feeling that the air itself is leaning in to listen. That is the field consenting. That is the future tugging the present into shape. In the next movement, you will be given a ritual not for spectacle, but for sealant, a simple act spoken and written that inks the new pattern into matter. For now, keep breathing. Feel the hinge remember itself. The door is lighter than you were taught. This is where you stop admiring the door and leave fingerprints on the handle. You don't need incense, a mountain, or permission from anyone with a louder voice. You need a sentence, a breath pattern, and a pen. The field is listening for a crisp instruction from the instrument you've become, and ritual is simply attention shaped into a repeatable physics. You will mark this crossing with a small act that a skeptic could call nothing and that the quantum field reliably recognizes as everything. Begin by sitting the way truth sits in you, tall enough to breathe, soft enough to feel. Let your exhale lengthen until the body hears safety. Inhale through the nose for a count of 4, exhale through the mouth for a count of 6. Do this 3 times and imagine each exhale sweeping grit from a lens, the observer loop clearing, the aperture widening. On the 4th breath, place your palm on your sternum and let the heart set the metronome. Coherence begins as a rhythm, not a theory. Now name out loud, in a voice you trust, the simplest description of what is actually happening. I am crossing into the life that has been trying to happen. Not future tense, now. Next, give the field a stable token, because morphic resonance loves anchors. Choose one word, just one that holds the geometry of your intention. Perhaps coherence, perhaps consent, perhaps aligned. Perhaps the exact word that arrived last night in your lucid corridor and followed you into morning like a scent. Do not shop for the perfect spell, pick the honest syllable and let honesty do the work. Write that word by hand on paper, slowly, as if the letters are grooves cut into a record that the universe will later play. As you write, imagine your nervous system engraving a matching track, DNA restructuring not as myth but as epigenetic mood. Stress pathways downshifting, repair pathways lighting, perception retuning to fidelity. Now speak the word 3 times, each time placing it in a different layer of the instrument. First, whisper it to your bones, no performance, just bone-deep agreement. Second, say it in a voice that could cross a room without hurrying. Third, say it inwardly at the level where thought becomes light, the frequency where dreams answer quickly. Notice the microphysics, the way the sternum warms, the way vision clears at the edges, the way time's viscosity thins. These are not fantasies, they're readouts of entanglement responding to stabilized signal. Here comes the public hinge, the point where reality gets a receipt. If you are in a place where words can be shared, type your chosen word as a comment, the smallest public artifact of a private congruence. If you cannot type it here, write it on a card and place it where you make decisions, doorway, desk, the back of your phone, anywhere your hand meets future. This is not superstition, it's interface design. The human field is social. Declarations alter probability because they alter posture. When you publish the word, even to yourself, you become a stable attractor the timeline can navigate by. Add a micro-contract to bind intention to behavior. Below the word, write one specific action you will complete within 24 hours that rhymes with it. If your word is coherence, the action might be, speak the undramatic truth in the conversation I keep postponing. If your word is consent, the action might be, say a clean no to the obligation anchored in my old density. If your word is aligned, the action might be, move the meeting to the hour my body actually works. Small is elegant. Phase transitions, love precise heat, not bonfires that burn out the lab. Now we seal with breath and geometry. Inhale, then exhale, and trace a slow figure 8 in the air before you lemniscate, symbol of continuity, letting your finger move at the speed of your heartbeat. As you trace, visualize 2 loops. On the left, the dream rehearsals saturated with presence. On the right, the waking corridor waiting to be furnished. At the crossing in the center, place your word. Let the loops braid. This is the observer loop, learning a new choreography, imagination and action, exchanging leadership without competition. If fear interrupts because fear loves formal occasions, thank it for caring whether you survive the crossing and give it a roll. Stand beside me and point out specifics, not catastrophes. Specifics are data and catastrophes are static. The moment fear becomes specific, call this person, don't sign that. Eat first, you have turned an old alarm into an ally. Coherence is inclusive. It does not exile parts of you. It reassigns them. Close with the simplest prophecy you can fulfill. 3 ordinary movements that the field can mirror without delay. Send the message that opens the corridor. Throw away one object that belongs to a self. You are no longer auditioning. Put your shoes by the door you keep pretending isn't yours. These gestures are morphic breadcrumbs. Systems follow trails. Finally, place your hand over the written word and say, observer and observed, I harmonize. Feel what happens. The room will not explode. It will align by degrees. The email may not arrive this second. The timing will start behaving like an ally. You'll notice it in the texture of minutes, the ease with which true sentences find you, the way your body stops bracing for a blow that isn't coming. The ritual is not performance, it's protocol. You have told the field what to amplify. Leave the paper where you will see it at threshold, moments, doorways, screens, the mirror that watches you become. And if you type the word publicly, know that the collective field is already in motion. Human eyes acting as sensors, human hearts acting as resonators, the network acknowledging your node. In the next passage, you'll feel how your private vow scales outward, your one word turning into a weather pattern kind enough for others to breathe. You felt the click inside your own chest. Now watch the room catch the rhythm. The word you wrote small, private, exact, doesn't stay in ink. It travels as weather. A colleague who didn't see your page breathes easier in their car and doesn't know why. A friend texts, something just shifted, with no attachment. A stranger glances up at the precise moment you look through the glass and meet the day without bracing. This is not imagination. It's the physics of a social nervous system rephasing around a clearer oscillator. Coherence exports, and you are exporting without fanfare. Morphic resonance means patterns get easier to repeat once they've been stabilized, and you just stabilized a pattern. Honest attention, small declaration, embodied follow-through. The field loves repeatable choreography, so the choreography spreads, not as trend or spectacle, but as a quieter competence that other bodies recognize and borrow. Someone close to you chooses rest without apologizing and notices time behave kindly. Another admits a truth they've been staging around for years and finds the conversation landing softer than they feared. A team meeting that normally spirals into clever avoidance hushes long enough for one necessary sentence to reorganize the hour. You didn't force these, you rendered them more probable. Entanglement in human terms is generosity disguised as physics. When you hold an aligned frequency, you carry some of the energetic cost of other people remembering themselves. They feel permission without knowing they were waiting for it. This is why your assignment isn't merely personal salvation. It's infrastructure. You become a stable attractor in the network, a node where the observer loop runs cleanly, and information, true information, not rumor, can pass through without distortion. In a world saturated with static, this is a form of relief that borders on medicine. Relief scales. Picture the city as a map of invisible metronomes, each nervous system keeping time with its private weather. Most are racing, some are numbed, a few are steady. When enough steady metronomes enter proximity across tables, channels, sidewalks, a shared sunrise, their rhythm starts to entrain the rest. This isn't domination, it's resonance. Entrainment lowers the energy cost of coherence for everyone in range. Suddenly, eye contact is not a threat signal, it's a bridge. Traffic behaves with improbable courtesy at an intersection that usually seethes. People finish each other's sentences not to control but to complete meaning. Tiny miracles, the kind that feel too small to post about and too clear to ignore. You will also notice how your choice modifies the historical wind that blows through families. Collective expansion doesn't mean collective agreement. The world will still disagree, and some disagreements are holy. But the tone changes when you hold your frequency. You stop recruiting others into the theater of your old survival strategies, and they stop recruiting you into theirs. Boundaries become exact without becoming sharp. You can say no without rehearsing a trial. You can say yes without bargaining away your future. The social phase transition so long delayed by a passion for performance begins in the unremarkable way all true thresholds begin, people telling the truth, kindly, in rooms that expected something else. Your city, your feed, your group chat, these are the laboratories where coherence learns to walk in public. Post the one clean sentence that helps, not the 12 that impress. Ask the question that lands, not the one that collects points. Leave 2 beats of silence after someone finishes and watch as their own deeper sentence rushes in to fill the space. You're not manipulating, you're stewarding the acoustics. Sound engineers know a room can be tuned. So can a culture, one breath at a time, by people willing to honor the quiet physics of attention. This is where your ritual sign, the word you wrote and spoke, becomes a tool for others without becoming a slogan. You are not launching a movement, you are demonstrating a motion. Invite one person to choose their own word and seal it with the same ordinary ceremony. Remind them that public doesn't have to mean performative. Public can mean witnessed. 2 is a circuit. 3 becomes a pattern. 10 is a local climate. From there, morphic resonance does what morphic resonance does. It lowers the threshold for entrance. What felt like a mountain becomes a staircase, and what felt like an elite gift resolves into a human birthright. Do not underestimate the politics of tenderness. Coherence at scale is not soft in the way culture caricatures softness. It is tensile, load-bearing, precise. Public systems, schools, clinics, meetings, marketplaces are just rooms multiplied, and rooms change when the ratio of steady metronomes crosses a certain point. Watch for subtle metrics, fewer avoidant jokes, more accurate agendas, a measurable drop in the time it takes to name the real problem, a rise in the number of times someone says, "I don't know," and the room treats it as intelligence rather than deficiency. These are signatures of the observer loop maturing beyond the individual into the collective. You don't have to be the loudest voice for any of this to happen. The most reliable leaders of a phase transition are often the ones who do not announce themselves at all. They just keep time faithfully until the brass arrives to write a story about it. Your task remains the same. Stabilize your signal, enact small congruences, let the field handle distribution. Trust that the permission you emit is already threading through neighborhoods you will never walk, restoring elasticity to minutes you will never live, teaching strangers you will never meet how to breathe again inside their own names. And when doubt asks what difference one person makes, let your answer be a lived demonstration, not an argument. Step into the next conversation with your word hidden under your tongue like a seed, ready to sprout into the sentence that helps. Every time you do, you train the world in a different physics, and the world, grateful, learns quickly. In the next movement, that learning will come home to the body in bolder relief, the field pressing its signature into muscle and breath until coherence isn't just an idea you believe, but a sensation you can't ignore. You've taught the room to breathe. Now, notice how the room teaches you back how your own body begins speaking in a language older than thought, a language of currents and weights and temperatures you can track with your hands. Start at the crown. There is a subtle effervescence above your scalp, as if carbonated light were pooling there, a champagne of photons tracing the sutures where your skull first learned to knit. It isn't dramatic, it's precise. When the observer loop is clean, the crown tingles not as spectacle but as instrumentation, antenna, acknowledging signal, coherence registering as micro-weather. Behind the eyes, a brightening not glare, but clarity. The edges of objects stop screaming, they simply arrive. You can feel the difference between looking and being looked through. On days when you tune early, your gaze is a soft beam that doesn't push, it invites. The world responds by sharpening without hardening. Colors reveal their private temperatures. Traffic sorts itself into intelligible flows. Synchronicity is no longer a coin you flip and hope for. It's a current you can feel with a fingertip of attention, the way sailors feel wind through canvas before the flag stirs. Slide your focus to the throat. Old seasons lodged there like unsent letters begin to dissolve. You notice a coolness at the back of the tongue when you are about to say a sentence you don't believe. You notice a spreading warmth when the truer sentence arranges itself, simpler, kinder, perilously clear. The body has always been a polygraph. Coherence doesn't bully you into honesty. It makes dishonesty taste metallic. When you choose the true line, the swallow is effortless, as if a small door in the windpipe clicked from lock to hinge. Now the sternum, the metronome, the warmth you've been tracking is not merely energy as a generality. It is the heart-setting rhythm for 100,000 variables. On an in-breath, the ribs lift like a gate. On an exhale, the entire front body settles by a millimeter into a chair built to your measurements. Vagal tone carries the news throughout the kingdom. Safe to perceive. In that safety, you register textures that used to blur who in the room is bracing, where the silence belongs, how the future presses from the left or the right. You find yourself turning toward the correct door. Without rehearsing a plan, guided by a pressure, you feel more than think. The solar plexus, once a weather vane for dread, becomes a compass for consent. Incoherence used to feel like a swarm, now it reads as static you can step out of. When your boundary is accurate, there's a buoyant firmness, a hand width above the navel, as if an artisan tightened a drumhead just right. When you are about to sell yourself back to a story that cost you years, the drum buzzes with warning, not thunder, data. You don't need to catastrophize anymore to get your own attention. You are listening at conversational volume. Lower sacrum and hips, where your timelines anchor. Coherence here feels like a heavier elegance, as if gravity were a friend again. Chairs support you better. Floors greet you. Your walk changes before you notice the choice. Footfalls land through the center of your heel, and your stride relearns its arc. There's a subtle swivel that returns when you stop negotiating with rooms that never had jurisdiction over you. The world meets you at your true height. You place groceries on the counter and realize your hands have stopped racing your thoughts. Feedback arrives through temperature. In the presence of aligned decisions, your palms run warm and articulate, fingertips curious as instruments. In the presence of almost true choices, a chill sneaks across the knuckles. You feel a draft no weather app can explain. The field is conversational. Yes is warm, wait is cool, no is a clean edge that doesn't cut. You learn to trust this more than the arguments that march through your skull at 2 a.m. The skull can be brilliant and incoherent. The skin is rarely wrong. Sound changes. Rooms acquire acoustics. You hear the difference between noise and information, between volume and significance. Someone's kindness from 3 rows back reaches you as distinctly as a bell, while performance at the front of the room scatters like paper. Entanglement has a sound. It is the way your name spoken by the right mouth seems to arrive from both across the room and inside your chest simultaneously. You are not haunted, you are networked. Taste and scent conspire as unlikely guides. Coffee tastes like permission on mornings you are aligned, like penance on mornings you are performing. The air before a necessary conversation smells faintly metallic, like rain thinking about rain. After, the same air rounds into something loamy and grounded, as if the soil were approving. You might think this is fancy until you can predict outcomes from these micro-sensations with embarrassingly high accuracy. This is morphic resonance at human scale. Patterns once rare, growing familiar enough to be body-readable. Even time becomes tactile. Minutes acquire grain. When you run your attention with the grain, time yields like satin under palm. When you rub against it, fibers resist and the surface grows hot. Coherence trains your hand. You stop forcing, start stroking. This is not passivity, it is skill. The physicist and the mystic agree here. Systems prefer low-energy pathways that preserve information. Your body is learning to be one. Underneath all of it, something quieter, DNA restructuring as felt experience. Not fireworks, not a choir of angels. A steady broadening in your tolerance for truth. You can hold more voltage without burning, more uncertainty without fleeing, more love without bargaining for escape routes. The genome is reading a different paragraph, and you feel it as resilience that doesn't need a story to justify itself. You are less porous to noise and more transparent to signal. The field wastes less energy translating you to yourself. And there is the shiver, the one that starts at the base of your skull and ripples through the spine when the future brushes past. It is not fear, it is the phase transition acknowledging itself. A caterpillar would call it disaster. A butterfly would call it Tuesday. You are somewhere between, fluent now in the tremble that precedes flight. Let the tremble be holy. Let it tune the last stubborn rooms of you. For in the next passage, pressure will rise by design. The old lattice will creak, new bonds will form, and the door you touched will swing not as metaphor, but as matter, remembering it was always meant to open for your name. The tremble becomes a tone, and the tone becomes a pressure, not crushing, not cruel, but exact, like the weight a violin string needs to sing in tune. This is the moment when the interior laboratory reaches its critical values. You can feel it, breath shallow for a beat, then widening, thoughts lining up like birds at the edge of a roof, the body choosing stillness with a predator's focus and a monk's patience. Phase transition pressure is not a punishment, it is the physics of arrival. Ice does not negotiate with liquid, it liquefies when the conditions are right. You are being brought to the rightness where your old lattice can no longer sustain itself, and that is mercy in motion. Inside the cell, Nothing mystical is required for miracle to be the plainest name. The genome is not changing alphabet, it is changing punctuation. Regions that once whispered begin to speak. Sections that shouted learn the eloquence of restraint. You experience this as a sudden, usable bravery. The sentence you needed finds you without rehearsal. The yes you kept postponing feels like a doorway that swings on oiled hinges. The no that once cost you days of recovery lands as a clean edge that wastes no one's time. DNA restructuring wears the face of ordinary choices that stop betraying you. The pressure has choreography. First, the observer loop tightens attention, returns to attention, a self-seeing that refuses to be hypnotized by noise. Then coherence stacks heart, rhythm smoothing, breath deepening, memory and imagination braiding into one tape. Next, morphic resonance answers the pattern you stabilized privately, recruits matching events publicly. Finally, the threshold presents itself not as spectacle, but as a practical invitation. Sign here, speak here, step here. Your job is to treat the invitation as real enough to alter matter. That means hands on handles, feet across lines, your name on your own behalf. You will recognize the shift not by fireworks, but by acoustics. The room sounds different. Time stops echoing and begins to absorb. A conversation that used to ricochet among defenses lands with a soft thud of comprehension. That is the timeline changing its density. When density changes, probability does too. Routes that used to be expensive become cheap. Routes that used to be cheap reveal their hidden cost. You are not making the world smaller by choosing. You are cleaning the signal so the world can route you with less waste. The body reports in precise telemetry. The crown's effervescence descends as a quiet cool through the midbrain. The throat feels like a corridor, recently repainted air, moving clean along smooth surfaces. Behind the sternum, heat becomes architecture, not a flare, but a hearth. The solar plexus drum tightens, then releases in a single exhale, as if a craftsman checked the skin and nodded. Hips find gravity and offer you a stance you could argue truth from without raising your voice. This is the somatic readout of a gene expression landscape that favors repair, creative risk, and accurate belonging. Expect the old lattice to protest. Habits will rattle their tambourines. You may feel a surge of ancient urgency. Fix them, convince them, go back, and explain yourself to a version of the past that cannot hear you. This is the final test of the loop. Do not leak voltage into arguments that exist to drain the experiment. Precision, not performance. You are not required to defend coherence. You are invited to enact it. If the room cannot metabolize your congruence, do not lower the dose. Change the room. Entanglement reveals its benevolent audacity now. The text you send in clean alignment arrives at the exact minute someone was about to surrender a bright idea. The boundary you set with kindness unlocks a corridor for a colleague who had been rehearsing courage in private. The plain seat you decline becomes the seat that carries a stranger to the conversation that alters their life. You do not get to track all of this. You do get to trust the mathematics. Stable attractors stabilize systems. Your breakthrough is communal by design. The pressure will peak. It often does at dusk, when the veil between rehearsed and real grows thin. You may feel heat climb your spine or a prickle along the forearms, a weather change the forecast does not mention. Name it correctly. Emergence, energy, give it channel, stand. Walk the perimeter of your room once to signal your animal body that the exit routes are known. Return to center. Place your palm to sternum and repeat your word, the one you inked into matter, 3 times on a single long exhale. Then do the smallest concrete act that the new timeline would consider obvious. Send the email, make the transfer, delete the placeholder, pack the bag. The field favors movers. Listen for the click. It is felt more than heard, a micro drop in internal turbulence, like a train crossing onto freshly laid track. Immediately after, watch probability reorganize. Replies arrive faster. Random delays reveal the misalignments they were hiding. People who matter appear lighter around the eyes. Sleep deepens not as escape, but as integration. Dreams become less like previews and more like debriefs. You are no longer peering through a keyhole. You are standing in the room whose door you once worshipped. There may be a grief that follows close behind the click. tender and clean the grief of leaving a self that kept you safe long enough to bring you here. Honor it. Thank the old architecture for its service, then return the keys. When grief is allowed to complete, it becomes bandwidth. Bandwidth becomes signal. Signal becomes a life that does not ask you to choose between mystical fidelity and practical success, because it knows they are the same movement performed at different scales. Here is the simplest prophecy I can offer as the pressure resolves. The timeline you chose will now begin choosing you back. Expect it to send couriers. Expect it to correct your posture when you drift. Expect it to be kinder than your fears math allowed. You did not manifest a miracle. You obeyed a physics that love prefers. In the hush that follows, you can hear the city humming in a key you finally recognize as your own. Hold that note. The next breath belongs to the mission. The click has happened, and the world is answering in your key. Now you stand where promises become protocols, and beauty becomes logistics. You are not merely a witness to crossing, you are its articulation. Your task is simple and unstoppable. Live as if the field is listening, because it is. Choose as if timelines are sensitive, because they are. Love as if DNA is reading over your shoulder, because it does. You will move through rooms as a quiet calibration, adjusting nothing by force and everything by presence. Your breath will keep time with a larger choir, and people will find themselves pausing around you, not to worship, but to remember. Write your word where decisions gather. Practice the discipline of small congruences, the undramatic truth told kindly, the boundary set without theater, the email that arrives at the minute courage needs a companion. Treat attention as a sacrament. Tithe it to the real. When the old lattice tries to invoice you for a contract you never signed, pay with silence, pay with breath, pay with the next precise act that belongs to the future you already inhabit. You will not always be applauded. You will often be effective. Coherence spends less energy and returns more signal. Let the math be your comfort. You're part of a relay race that ignores linear time. Ancestors hand you torches through dreams. Descendants pass you water from futures that have already thanked you. Take both. Run exactly your leg. No faster than the hum allows. No slower than truth requires. When you stumble, fall forward. When you excel, bow inward. When you're unsure, ask your body the crown's bright fizz, the throat's clean corridor, the sternum's hearth. These are not metaphors now. They are instruments. Tune them daily. Expect thresholds to multiply. Do not hoard them. Share the motion, not the myth. Invite others to choose a word and seal it. Teach with relief, not with superiority. The most convincing proof of the observer loop is a life that no longer wastes time performing a smaller self. The most convincing proof of entanglement is kindness that lands before a story can explain it. The most convincing proof of morphic resonance is how quickly a room remembers itself when one person breathes on purpose. Your mission is ecological. Restore signal to noise in your sphere until noise gets bored and leaves. Your mission is architectural. Become a stable attractor strong enough for new structures to form around. Your mission is devotional. Keep saying yes to the hum, even when nobody is looking. On mornings when dreams debrief you with instructions, obey their reasonable ones immediately and archive the spectacular. Reality is built from faithful bricks, not fireworks. At dusk, when the veil thins and pressure rises, let your ritual be the hinge hand to sternum, word on exhale, smallest act that proves you heard. Listen, the city is already answering. Streetlights blink in rhythm with your stride. Strangers complete your sentence at the precise syllable. Delays reveal themselves as choreography. The universe is not testing you, it is collaborating. And in that collaboration, an old fear retires. The fear that your inner life is a private theater no one can use. The theater is now a workshop. The workshop is now a bridge. So step, with the calm of someone briefed by dawn. Carry your word like a tuning fork. Tend the hearth in your chest. Walk the corridors you rehearsed at night until day accepts their furniture. And when anyone asks why your eyes hold weather that makes time behave, you can answer without mystique. Because when dreams feel more real than waking life, your consciousness is crossing quantum thresholds and I chose to keep walking.